Hey everybody, and welcome back to the Fearless Training United Raw Knowledge Podcast with myself, as always, Alex Connor. And today I had the pleasure of speaking with a very talented young athlete and coach by the name of Liam Bygott. Liam is a junior professional natural bodybuilder. He's also part of the very talented team at Hold Your Own, based in Burleigh here in the Gold Coast of Australia, where they specialise in physique coaching, strength and conditioning, body recomposition, all in respect to evidence-based and anecdotal practices. And in my opinion, one of the best facilities within Australia. And in this conversation today, we look at some of the pros and cons versus evidence-based versus anecdotal. We also look at the mind frame and the motivation, not only for young athletes such as Liam himself and others aspiring to achieve great things, but also a mindset that consists of growing, progressing, learning, and having that patience and the strength, the mental strength to overcome the adversity. I really enjoyed this conversation, and there's a lot of golden nuggets and a lot of great knowledge and tools that you can take out of it. Whether you're starting off in the gym, you're already an established coach, or you're just someone who wants to improve your body composition, I believe you're going to get a lot out of this one. So pay attention. If you have to, listen to it twice and be sure to share it on with others who you'll think will benefit from this as well. And as always, you can find out more about my guest Liam in the show notes below, and also a little bit more about what we do here at Fearless Training United. Without further ado, guys, enjoy this conversation with Liam Bygott. All right, welcome to the podcast, Liam. Thank you for joining me today. Appreciate your time. What have you been up to? You had a busy one?
Thanks, Alex. Really appreciate your time, mate. Yeah, I've been pretty busy the past couple of weeks, and I guess leading into the 2019, I've had a few big things on my plate with both work and then coming off to big competitive season and into some new goals into this year. But yeah, I'm really grateful for the opportunity to be on your podcast and hopefully provide some insight and clarify any questions.
Thank you very much, and I'm sure you will, and look forward to digging deep into some of those past accolades that you achieved in 2018 and some of the future goals 2019 and beyond. So what I wanted to start with, as we usually do, is how did you get into bodybuilding, natural bodybuilding specifically, strength-based coaching? What inspired you? Just a little bit of a bio about yourself, what you do and why you do it, really.
So I guess I got into the bodybuilding realm as many sort of younger males would have fell into the same way. I started out in the gym and had a real passion for what I was doing, and it was coupled with the effect at the same time I was actually studying exercise science. So I had both the physical enjoyment and then I guess also the career prospect to it as well. So I was sort of heading in two directions at one. I was taking things relatively serious in the gym, and my local supplement owner of the time I was living at in the Sunshine Coast, I was sort of in conversation with him, and he discussed the prospects and looking into doing a bodybuilding show. And obviously the first one was a very big learning curve, to say the least. I actually ended up still placing top 3 in my class, which was pretty exciting at the time. But coming out of that, I learned an absolute lot as to what I did well, and then possibly things I wouldn't do again or definitely do better moving into the next bodybuilding show. And at the time, I was sort of getting into the more crux of my exercise science degree and learning a little bit more about that with the textbook knowledge, and I guess practicing a little bit what I was a preach and making sense of everything that there was out there, because I guess there is abundance of information out there, but unfortunately there's an abundance of stuff that might not be the best approach to follow. So I was very lucky to have the opportunity to be coached by Hold Your Own at the time, and I was an online client, so I had some structuring going for both my nutrition and training programming. And that sort of got the ball rolling on some momentum and learning, adhering to a training program, understanding what it means to be following particular reps and following particular sets, because prior to that, I guess I really lacked in structure. And that's what I find that a lot of people initially do, is that they feel they're doing things efficiently, and until they pull structure there, things become a lot more measurable and manageable as you move forwards. So I guess if you fast forwards then about 2 years, I was lucky enough to be coached and did another bodybuilding show, and obviously that one I was a lot more successful at the time. I took it through to Australian titles, and it was a much more efficient prep, but again, another learning curve. I find that every time I do a prep, there's things you really learn a lot about yourself and possibly the protocols you adhere to, and you're literally manipulating variables with the body. So you can really recognize and elucidate, okay, this worked well, but perhaps we could do this better as we move into the next one. And then fast forward another year, I competed in 2018, and that was obviously my most successful year to date, and really enjoyed that process, and things travelled quite well for me. And I've also carried that on with my studies. So I'm now working for Holdrone as a strength and conditioning coach, nearing the end of an exercise physiology degree, and enjoying both the practical application in my career and then also the practical application as an athlete as well. So I'm very lucky to have both of those aspects so tightly related.
Yeah, and again, just such a great run in terms of marrying up the theory and the practical of what you're studying, and then also actually being able to be in the industry as an athlete, but then also coaching athletes, like you said, in a great facility. And you mentioned some really great points there, and some things that I want to delve into. I think the first one is there's a plethora of knowledge out there at the minute. You know, people like yourself, you're trying to provide a better knowledge, a better standard. What do you think are some of the main things that people can do who want to, you know, improve their knowledge, even just at a basic level, maybe whether it's an athlete or someone that just wants to improve their physique? Is there any resources or any things you think that they should be doing or looking at? It might be even the way you think about approaching the gym that you would recommend, or that you've learned in your experience as a coach and as a client?
I guess there's a lot of recommendations you can make, and I guess to sum it up easily enough for someone who's starting out, and I guess something that I've now recognised looking back on my past couple of years, which have been relative productiveness, is the investment required into natural bodybuilding or training itself. And it's almost one of those things where you have to be willing to work so hard for each day, with almost seeing zero to no initial return. However, long term, it's when you look back and you can recognise and derive all the progress you've made over that period of time. And you wouldn't have if it wasn't for each single day. That initially you might not see that response, but you know that long term it's working to the better good. So there's a big sacrifice involved. As far as, I guess, finding the right tools or the right advice or the right direction, that really does depend on, I guess, the position you're in. So if you are looking at taking it to the extremity of a bodybuilding stage, it's probably highly wise to seek out a coach. And in my advice, it's possibly a coach that can tick the box of not only practical application and can practice what they preach, but also has that experience and those hours under their belt, that are very aware and have worked with a diverse quantity of clients and understand the protocols required and the differentiation that exists with person to person. And hopefully they'll be able to give you the right tools to follow to make the right decisions. And you want to spend your time wisely in the gym, because when you sort of take out the forefront and the end of a bodybuilding preparation, for example, you do have a finite amount of time in between. So you want to really be smart with your investment into that. And
again, some great points. And I guess it's just going back to basics with a lot of things. And as you said, there is a lot of knowledge out there, and sometimes it can be hard to differentiate between those, I guess, initial principles, if you like. And a lot of it is hands-on and learning and whatnot as well. And you won't mind me saying this, you're quite a young bodybuilder. And you've achieved quite a lot of success. I know you're very humble in that from your time in the sport. What is a message or any key takeaways for other young bodybuilders? Because I know there's a lot of young people out there, whether they want to take it to the extreme, as you mentioned before, or whether they just want to look good with their tops off. Is there any advice, because you're still in that age bracket, that you would offer the younger age group of people who are going and lifting weights to maybe not just avoid injury, but also to increase their results and their performance? And you mentioned something, which I think was really good about patience. Like you said, it is, as a natural athlete and even in bodybuilding in general, you don't see a return very quickly on your investment, but over time you do. So of course, patience is a big thing. But what, I guess, from your perspective, some of the key learnings and elements that you would pass on, say, if you could speak to yourself when you started lifting?
I guess it's probably, for me, looking back now, I guess as anyone becomes more advanced, it's easy to look back on the past couple of years and see what went well and what you would advise yourself if you were talking to yourself 3 years prior to that. And for me, it's always been a tie-in of, I guess, correct structure, or I guess correct plan in the approach that you're heading, and then work ethic. And if you can tie those two together, you've pretty much set up for success. Often I feel, though, that there can be a little bit of imbalance. So you might take someone with strong work ethic, but they might lack in structure. Or you might take someone with a strong structure and well-regimented training, but they lack in the work ethic.
Mm-hmm.
So not only seeking advice, or I guess creating the fundamentals of the foundation, the direction you're heading at is important, but also be willing to give it absolutely everything you've got, because it's a very difficult sport. And when you do really look at the period of time that you have, the amount of hours that you put in, and for the amount of hours it takes to get where you want to be, they're pretty farly outweighed. So for a lot of natural bodybuilders who you see or someone might aspire to could have been training for up to 10 plus or minus years, which is an extremely long time.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess you have to be willing to denote that it might take you 10 years to get there, but what you do now is going to derive whether you get there or not, or whether you achieve the physique you want. So investing that work ethic into correct structured training and nutrition is absolutely critical, because time is a finite thing, and it is always going to be against you. It's not very often that you'll hear someone say, "I've got a heap of time up my sleeve." So that's one thing that I've often advised, is that you've got to recognise the time you've got to have. You've got to break that into the structure that you need, and you've got to be willing to work your absolute butt off to get from point A to point B.
Yeah, some great points there again, Liam. So kind of to recap on that, marrying the two together, setting an expectation for time, understanding the time frame, marrying the hard work and the application of actually getting in there and working at a certain intensity, but then also having a more intelligent approach and structure to training, and again having those things in unison and working to your advantage with that. That would be kind of...
Absolutely.
You agree with that? Yeah.
100%. If I were to look back at, because only being young, bodybuilding of 22, but I look back at the two things that I think I can say I did well. Obviously, there's lots of things that I can do better, but there was just two things that, having been fortunate enough to have the correct structure, and then I wouldn't say lucky enough, but having the right head on me to realise that I had to work as hard as I possibly could. And I did both of those things, and that saw me progress. And they're two things that I know I'm just going to keep doing. But there's obviously a lot of other areas that, as an athlete, you can look at yourself and break down things you can do better as you move forwards.
So I guess always looking at yourself, looking at critically in terms of feedback, where can you improve, never being satisfied, not necessarily in a negative way, but again, never kind of relying on what you've got, but always analysing, okay, well, where can I improve, or what needs to improve, and maybe that is from third-party involvement. And to segue out of that, you are someone, we've trained in the same gym together. I've watched the way you train for a fair amount of time. You are very focused. You're very dedicated. Where do you find your motivation comes from? Where do you find the hunger? Is it from previous experiences that you've had? Do you draw inspiration from other external factors, or is it the goals ahead of you? That what fuels your fire, if you like? Like, what is it for you that really, allows you to continuously, day in, day out, and it is a slog, and we all know this, to turn up, do the work, not only for yourself, but also for your clients?
I guess for me, I've never really tried to, and sometimes advice to my clients is not to always be highly dependent on motivation, because it is something that comes and goes, and when it's there, it's great, but when it's not, it's not, and it's very hard to depend on an independent variable. So for me, I've just always enjoyed the challenge associated with training, and the future aspect and the acknowledgement that you will never be able to outdo your performance in the gym. There is always something better you can do. So I've really enjoyed the challenge and the hardship that's approached, and acknowledging how hard I have to work to improve as an individual. I heard a really cool quote one day that said that more often than not, 90% of people will give up to 40% of their intensity realm. And I just so hardly agree with that, because as you will learn as an athlete, where you thought your failure point was, you've now realised that failure point is so far beyond where you can actually achieve to. And it's the mental stimulation, or I guess what you learn about yourself mentally and what you're capable of doing when you're so farly in the depths of your discomfort zone, is when you really start to learn about yourself. So you really start to think, okay, I was so doubting myself leading into that. And if I had to acknowledge and continue those thoughts, that's just your body's way of bringing things into homeostasis and bringing it into the comfort zone. But it all starts when you're out there. And I guess I've just learned to almost be obsessed by that feeling. And it's something that I find through training just always seems to give me, regardless of how good or bad I feel, or how much I'm doubting myself, and acknowledging or or not acknowledging something.
Mm-hmm.
I'm aware that it's the minute I get into that comfort zone is the minute that my body is outside of where it wants to be, but that's where I'm learning. And I feel you must learn in order to progress. You'll never learn everything. No one ever will.
Yeah, and that's probably some hard truths there as well. I like the quote. I think it's very realistic. It's probably quite accurate as well. Especially in this day and age, I think we live in a society which is, especially in Australia, we've got a really good life here, from someone who's not from here originally, and it is easy to probably get set in your ways. And again, the body, from a physiological standpoint as well, not just a psychological one, it doesn't really want to. It doesn't want to change at a certain point. You have to cause that demand. So I like how you have that growth mindset of, you look at the adversity and the pain and the challenge as a positive, and you use that to acknowledge that what drives you. And when you're feeling, like you said, outside your comfort zone, you are growing, you're actually making progress. And I think it is a bit of a perception, Liam. I don't know if you'll agree, but, you might look back a couple of years ago when you were training hard, and it was hard. But then you think about the training you're doing now, and it's not about being super hardcore, but the level of intensity that you may or may be able to apply and sustain now is quite a difference than what you could do before. And again, it's that taking time, right? You can't just jump in the gym and expect to do what someone of 10 years has been doing, because you're just going to injure yourself, and that's not the right mind frame. But having that acknowledgement to go, you know what, I need to go through a certain level of pain and adversity, and know that you can give more. And when sometimes you think that you are going to give up and you've not got anything left in the tank, but you do, that's those times where you know that you can grow, and you can look back and go, well, hang on, if I thought I didn't have enough then and I pushed through, then maybe I can push through and reach even more great success, which I guess is ultimately what drives some of the greatest minds and physiques in our industry. And I wanted to ask, in terms of that, having that mind frame and that mental strength, you prepped in 2018. It was my first time. It was a big learning as well. And I think, a lot of us at Hold Your Own, we all kind of went through it. For you, you'd been through it before. What are some of the things in prep, when it gets hard for you, that you kind of hang on to or keep you going? And again, I guess, what are the main differences between your first prep and this prep, and any sort of takeaways that help you again sort of get in, sustain that momentum and achieve ultimately what you need to do when it is at the very fine end of the pencil? Because there's pushing hard in the off season, and then there's pushing hard in prep, and they are obviously two very different things. So I guess, what's the disparity now in terms of prep? What do you find motivates you in that phase of your training?
I guess there's a multitude of reasons, and having the benefit of being through a period both, in your prep and in your off season, you acknowledge that at the time prep feels like it's going forever, and you feel like it's never going to end, and all the hardship you're experiencing is just extremely overwhelming. But when you look back at it, you really think that wasn't that big of a time, and it was really just a scratch on the surface. And the whole period of time that you train as an athlete, and the time in your off season and those hard sessions, they're the ones that you really do remember. Whereas preps, it is just a period to get you where you needed to be. But I sort of see it as a bit of a blur. It was a difficult time, but it got me to where I wanted to be, and it was an enjoyable process overall, and that's why I'll do it again. But leading into my comp prep, and anyone who's been in through it, you can recognise, and you're very aware of the challenges that you're going to lead into. It's a far too hard of a difficult process to not give something 100%. And I'll often have this conversation with a lot of my clients, and I'll say that if you're not remotely 110% leading into it, it's not the time to compete just yet. Because you want to ensure there is not a single stone that hasn't been flipped upside down before you step on that stage. So wherever it is you place, regardless of first or second or last, that is your absolute 100%. And that is an indicative of the best performance that you can bring to stage. If you're willing to only put in 99%, then you can debate, was that really your best? And it's far too hard of a period of time to be asking yourself questions at the end when there's already a lot of automatic negative thoughts going through your mind. You want to be able to put absolutely everything in, control absolutely the variable there is to control, so that when you get on stage, there is not a single doubt in your mind that is the best you will ever look at that point in time. That snapshot is the best you will look at that point in time. And then you'll take the time off, you'll improve, and then hopefully replicate that leading in. So it's that commitment that I make mentally before I start, is that when it starts. There is absolutely no looking back. And if there is, then don't prep just now. You might need to take a little bit more time off and perhaps look in a couple of months' time. So that's sort of two things that I look at is the commitment that I've committed to myself. There's no one forcing me to do this, and I'm going to give it absolutely everything I have, because I'll look back at it and say it was really just a scratch on the surface, and I can't wait to do it all again. So, yeah.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with what you said there, and specifically leave no stone unturned. I think where there's a lot of athletes, and I think it's great that you're explaining that to your clients. Do you feel 100%? Can you give it everything? If not, don't do it. Because like you said, it's, even though it is a scratch on the surface, it's a period of time that you don't want to waste that time, because it is a big commitment. Something that I learned, I think you have to be in the right place mentally, physically, and financially. Prep, because again, it is, I think, the expectation, again, has not been set for natural bodybuilding. The standard is very high. It's only getting higher. If you are to do your due diligence and do your best and give your best, not only for yourself, but also to compete at a level with these athletes that we now see grace the stage, you have to give it everything. And like you said, anything less would just be pure robbery of yourself. So I think there's some great points that we can take from that, Liam, and I really like your mindset and again, how you coach that to your clients and sort of put it back on them and ask them the question, because ultimately it's something that you can guide them through. You can give them all the information at the end of the day, but you can't do it for them. So if they've got that commitment and they've made that commitment, then they're more likely to stick with the plan. In terms of your coaching, do you coach mostly physique competitors? Do you have a lot of just general population clients? What is the ratio currently, and do you have a preference of client that you like to work with?
I guess obviously having that sort of study textbook background of me with the exercise scientist, I do really enjoy working with a diversity amount of clients. At any point in time, I guess the percentage is never really the same. There could be times where it's 50-50, sort of you could classify as generic clients versus your competition prep clients, and that can be seasonal, leading up to a competition time, anywhere up to 10 people on a given day or at a given period of time in a comp prep season, or as down as low as 2. It really does depend on, I guess, the clientele demand at the time, but I enjoy working with any athlete regardless of their goals, because for me as a coach, I'm just trying to fill the gap that, like I mentioned, build that work ethic and understanding and try and fill the gap of their structure, because that's what I know that works. So I'm just trying to assist someone, giving them guidance to do that, whether that means getting onto a stage or whether that means getting their squat to a particular number, or whether that means just generally improving their body composition is sort of without my concern. That's where they want to be, and I want to try and help them to get there. For the most of the time, I enjoy working with that change, because as a coach, it challenges me, and I like that. Okay, this might not be a competition prep client, but we need to work on the fundamentals or the execution of a particular exercise, and that's a challenge. And that brings out my skill set and doing my best to assist someone. Or on the other hand, it's okay, this individual is 4 weeks out from a competition and they've done quite successful in that prior. We really need to make sure we're nailing every single day leading in. So there's obviously a different challenge there. So it exercises different tools that I have to work with as a coach, and it puts all of my practical skills into place, so that it means that I can hopefully learn as much, because you can never learn too much. And I don't think you can ever work with too many people and learn from that. So hopefully that means that my skill set and hopefully my quality as a coach hopefully improves as I move on in advance.
Yeah, and I'm sure it will, Liam. And it's a very assertive approach you have there as well. Again, very optimistic as well, always looking at it as a growth or a challenge or a way to coach and guide and help your clients achieve the goals, whatever they may be. And to dive into some more of those questions, especially for the coaches listening out there, can you maybe give us a rundown or a breakdown I'm fairly familiar with some of it, from my time at Hold Your Own. How do you approach things with your clients? Obviously, specifics is going to be very different, but what does the main structure look like? Could you kind of walk us through a couple of, systems and that you use with your clients in terms of like programming, nutrition, recommendations? And again, I know it's going to change for like a physique client to obviously a more general population client, and generally, depending on their goals, whether it is to, lose body fat, gain muscle, or body recomposition as a whole. But can you talk us through some of the main principles that you coach from, and obviously within Hold Your Own? How do you guys do things?
So we've always utilised a software called Recomposer, which is quite well known in the industry at the moment. Mm-hmm. And for us, it's always, I guess, been advanced, or it's been adequate enough for us to write tailored programming, and it's also provides the requirements that are necessary for nutrition and the flexibility that may be required from person to person as well. I guess if you were to look at it from a broader spectrum and what the purpose is, and the main things that I'm sort of thinking in when it comes to writing a program for an individual, regardless of where their goals are, because as you acknowledged, it's going to change from person to person. Mm-hmm. But with the training aspect of things, for the most of the time, the goal is to get stronger. And regardless of whether that goal may be or who the individual is, generally speaking, we want to see some improvement in strength. Mm-hmm. And for a lot of us, we will base it off the biggest movements, or the big three, the squat, bench, and deadlift, or thereabouts, so that we can sort of derive the backbone of someone's strength. And we can ensure that, are we seeing a movement in the forwards or backwards direction? Mm-hmm. And then we can use all the accessory movements, all the alterations in volume, training programming, periodization, your meso blocks, macro blocks, etc., to, I guess, alleviate the rate of progress that we need to make. Does someone have 24 weeks that they need to improve their strength by, or is someone just looking at generally feeling better and a time isn't necessarily into play? So there's obviously the progressive overload approach, and strength improvement is where it comes down to the training aspect of things. And that is a custom then, if you were to look at what exercise we'd use, training volumes, total weekly sets, types of blocks that we'd run, the aggressiveness of the program or the regressiveness of the program is individually specific. Mm-hmm. And that's going to tailor into their nutrition as well. And for the most with nutrition, it's relatively basic if you look at it from a broader spectrum, that we just need to be able to measure things and manage things. So we need to be able to measure someone's intake, ensuring that they're adhering to that, seeing the response in their protocols and how their body composition may alter, and then we just make manageable changes to get them to where they want to be. Is that gaining or losing body fat mass? Is that gaining or losing lean mass? And how tightly related to that, which more often than not, all the time, will niche into your training. So, for example, if someone's looking at pushing their body weight up and looking at maximizing muscle mass, we know that we're going to need to be substituting additional food intake to substitute the additional weight gain or the weights that they're moving in the gym. Mm-hmm. So they are very tightly correlated. But if you look at sort of, I guess, a broader spectrum from nutrition, it is just sort of being able to measure and manage things moving forwards.
Mm. So some great simple tools, a very sort of evidence-based, practical approach. I've had a little bit of experience with Recomp myself, more on the client end of things. It is a great system. It's a great tool. And I know it's only getting better. I guess that's a big coaching aid, if you like, as a coach, to have a system which helps you communicate that to the clients, which helps you manage those systems, I guess, and also customize them from what I've seen and what I've heard. How do you manage adherence with your clients from someone, I guess, that is a little bit, or a clientele which is a bit more challenging? What are some strategies that you found, not only just in your own experience, but maybe you've learned from your fellow coaches, which help a client obviously stick to the program a little bit more sustainably? Is there any specifics there that you could maybe throw out and sort of share?
From a coach's end, I guess there's sort of two things that I've really found worked well. And the first one being care. A client has to really show that you genuinely care for everything they're doing, and you're trying, from your coaching end, to provide or make things as achievable and maintainable for them in their longevity. That's a really, really important thing, is showing that you care enough. And the second, I guess, is maintaining or achieving longevity in something. So whether that means they may need to really follow a flexible approach, or they may need to touch base with you more frequently on any changes that are required, whether they need some occupation or lifestyle specific factors taken into account in their nutrition. And that there ties into your care factor. I think when it comes to, as a coach, working in building someone's adherence and understanding the importance of compliancy really can sometimes come from the coaching end, and showing they really care and that you're willing to provide 120% to them if they're willing to just give you 100%. And often not, that is so complementary to a client that you'll find their motivation to move forward sees that, okay, this coach is willing to provide the flexibility and is really working hard to try and meet all the demands and the main